Imagine you're trying to get a monkey to recite Shakespeare on a pedestal. You have two jobs. Job number one is, can you get the monkey to recite Shakespeare? Job number two is to build the pedestal. What most people do is they go ahead and they start building the pedestal because it feels like work, it feels like progress. But the pedestal doesn't matter if you can't get the monkey to recite Shakespeare. Trust and reputation are the two most valuable assets you can have in this world. And the reason why they're so valuable is because we all know intuitively how hard and how long they take to build. You can't fake it. You can fake a lot these days. You can't fake trust in relationships.
The Grateful Podcast with Jack Wagoner presents. Subscribe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Wagoner, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who will challenge the way you think about business in the digital age. Our guest is none other than Jonathan Goodman, an entrepreneur, educator, and author of 12 books, including his latest, The Obvious Choice. There we go. This book completely reshaped how I view building a business. It's fun, insightful, and packed with practical strategies for becoming the go-to expert in your field. The obvious choice. You don't do this through gimmicks or algorithms, but by focusing on real human connection. I was blown away by how Jonathan breaks down business success in such an engaging and actionable way. In fact, I'll be giving away 2 copies of The Obvious Choice to lucky listeners. Check details in the description. But Jonathan's impact goes far beyond writing. He has revolutionized the fitness coaching industry, founding the Personal Trainer Development Center, and creating Quick Coach, a free software that helps coaches run their businesses more effectively. He also hosts the Obvious Choice podcast, where he shares powerful insights on business, coaching, and personal growth. On top of all that, Jonathan is a husband and a father who spends his winters traveling the world with his family, living proof that success doesn't have to come at the expense of freedom and fulfillment. I deeply respect both what he's built and how he's chosen to build it. I can't wait to dive into this. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Did your research, man. Thank you.
I did. I mean, reading 220 pages helps get that in your head, you know?
You would be amazed, though. You would be amazed, Jack, how far ahead you are in this field. I've probably done, 70, 80 podcasts, and maybe 4 or 5 of them. I'm like, oh, you were prepared.
It's crazy, dude. It's crazy. I've had people say that before. I'm like, what are you doing? If you have this hour with someone, and if you want to get something out of it, I feel like the obvious choice is to prepare a little bit for it.
I think it's just it's so easy these days to do a bad job in whatever we're doing. We're using Riverside right now. Podcasting is pretty easy to make it sound pretty good and look pretty good these days. It wasn't always that way. Same with creating content on social media. Same with even self-publishing books or whatever, right? And I think that's all wonderful. There's more opportunity than there's ever been. But I think that the blessing is also a curse. It is up to you to figure out where you're going to plant your flag and what you're going to focus on, and be able to accept the necessary trade-offs that there's going to be a lot that you're not going to be able to do, but it's actually better to do what you do really, really well and choose carefully. And not that can't change, but,
right.
All of those other folks, it's like a podcast is like one thing. They also have a business that they run, that they operate, in addition to they're making reels, then they're trying to write emails, then they're, they got to be on LinkedIn because you got to be on LinkedIn these days. So podcast is just one more thing.
Right. Yeah. You had this idea in the book you talked about a lot that kind of goes along with that, about being at a concert and you try to talk to your wife right next to you, and you have to scream super loudly to get your point across, right? But then if you're in a quiet room, you can talk. And I think that goes hand in hand with that. That stuff is just so loud right now, but people are trying to scream through all of this noise instead of just finding one thing and being able to, they don't have to scream to do it. They can talk quietly. They can have a normal conversation.
Yeah, they can kind of say, hey, come to me, right? If you think this way, if you're interested in this, come to me. I actually am thinking about that a lot lately, Jack. I mean, my platform and everything that I did was simplified before.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming increasingly simplified to the point where actually my only job is to write more or less an article a week, and then everything else flows from there. I've changed the format of my podcast where I'm presenting the article, and the same with YouTube. There's some contextual editing by others, but my job is to write that article, and it goes hand in hand with that story of, this big electronic music festival, where, dude's doing cocaine on the front of his hand in front of us, careful not to bump into us, and we can't even move, it's so loud. And if I'm trying to talk to Allison, I have to yell in her ear. Doesn't matter if you're shouting louder than anybody else, you're not going to get heard. But then go to a library and whisper, and you'll have 5 people giving you dirty looks.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you shouting louder in an already noisy place, or are you going to the quiet place? And for me, that quiet place is actually long form writing on the internet, which seems crazy in this day and age. But that's the focus. That's what I want to be doing. And so to me, it's a matter of what are the timeless things that you can focus on, that you can get truly great at, and then how can you use perhaps the timely assets or media platforms that exist that are going to go away. You don't own your audience, all this stuff. You use that to amplify the timeless work that you're doing. Can you build it out that way? Is what I'm thinking about a lot these days.
That's really interesting. Yeah. But do you think you'd be able to do that if you hadn't done the work that, you've done a lot of stuff in the past that's got you to this point. So this is almost like would you say it's your reward for all the work you've done in the past?
Perhaps. I think there's certainly a tailwind that I'm enjoying. But look, there's people who have done different types of work that I have that are enjoying a greater tailwind because, their work maybe is more in vogue today with the topics that are out there, or maybe they're better than me. Who knows? But yeah, for sure. Look, trust and reputation are the 2 most valuable assets you can have in this world. And the reason why they're so valuable is because we all know intuitively how hard and how long they take to build. You can't fake it. You can fake a lot these days. You can't fake trust and relationships and reputation, like real relationships, not like social media friends. Not that those don't have value too. They do, of course. So yeah, Jack, I think there's a tailwind.
Yeah.
I think certainly there's a financial tailwind where I don't need to worry about it. But part of that also is just gaining an acute awareness of how much you actually need. A lot of the reason that we fear and that fear stops us is because we haven't made the unknown known. Like, have you actually sat down and you're like, yo, this is how many dollars I need this month? If you do that, you might find that you need to get up to that point and you're not there yet. Fine. Then your path becomes clear. I'm going to do whatever I can to make the most amount of money, even if it's not scalable today, to get to that point so that I can be free to work on the work that is deeply fulfilling or that I think will feed me, long term. Or you might realize that you're already there, which is a wonderful realization, because then you can offset all the bullshit that you're doing because it's fear, because you don't actually know. And then you can free up a lot of time and mental energy to focus on whatever your thing is, become great at it. I think that success is a lagging indicator of becoming great somewhere. I think everybody is trying to become good everywhere on their path to success. I think actually you need to become great somewhere, and then you build audiences by amplifying where you're already great. But fewer and fewer people are doing that hard, deep work to become great.
Right. Oh, we live in a world with so many distractions and so many things. Gurus on Instagram are always telling you that you can do this and easily you'll become good at this or good enough to make 10K a month. That's like a number.
Which you might.
Right. Yeah, maybe. And
where do you live? Is 10K enough? Like 10K a month is not enough, dude.
Right.
I hate to break it to you. Used to be.
And so, yeah, what you're saying is it's really hard to just focus in on one thing and try to become
Yeah.
great at one thing. I think there's this risk involved. There's this addiction it's not new to be addicted to instant gratification, but it's definitely it's hugely prevalent. It's something I mean I am just now in the past few months really like embodying that idea that I want to become great at one thing instead of good at a lot. And it feels really good. How did you get there? How did you kind of figure that out?
It hit me over the head enough times that I finally started listening to it. I mean,
That's how it works.
but yeah, like the answer is it was a long and winding path. I mean, I was I never wrote anything. I was not that kid in high school who wrote short stories for fun. But then when I was a personal trainer, I mean, I was just searching for a way to make a little bit of extra money in a little bit less time, like anybody in any service industry. And I was reading books. I was going to the library. This is how long ago this was. I was going to the library. I was checking out books. And I came across this book called Multiple Streams of Income by this guy named Robert G. Allen. And I had no idea how good the book is. This was like 15 years ago. But in that book, he had a chapter on something called infopreneuring. Keep in mind, this is 2008. So this book was called this book had this chapter on what's called infopreneuring, which was mind-blowing at the time. You can sell information and make money from it. And it was just another thing that I was investigating. I built business plans for smoothie operations around that time. I studied real estate investing, like residential real estate investing. And then in that chapter, he talked about how you can actually write and self-publish your own book about something that you already do as a job because other people who are earlier on in your career could benefit from that. Again, mind-blowing at the time, right? And I had been a personal trainer at that point. I was 23 years old. I had been a personal trainer for about 4.5 years. I was like, okay, well, there's new personal trainers. Like, clearly there's people farther along than me, but I've also learned some shit in my last 4 years. And so I wrote a book for personal trainers and I self-published it. Book came out in 2011. It's called Ignite the Fire. That book, based off of that, started a website to promote the book, started publishing other people. And then I was like, okay, now I have an audience. Now I have a platform. I mean, you're talking to a guy who spent $1 million plus on content from 2013 to 2019. I was a quote-unquote creator before that word existed. And so I did all the things, Jack. I hosted 5 conferences. I've built 8 digital programs, 3 membership sites. I own a software platform still for some reason. I mean, I counted at one point a while back for the first time ever. I've actually built 7 different unique verticals where I've built at least a 6-figure business in them. And then what I'm left with at the end of it is there's actually one common thread throughout all of them, which is, idiot, your books. Why are you trying to do all this other shit? That's the only thing that's persisted. And so I took a little bit of time away. You know, we had this, I told this story in The Obvious Choice where it started where, obviously as a result of COVID-19, things went a little bit sideways. And then my wife got diagnosed with cancer and I just took some time away to kind of think and reassess. I was like, okay, well, this is a message that's been beating me over the head. Maybe I'll pursue what I call like full-time authorship. And that's when I went out and got an agent, got a publishing deal, published that book, Obvious Choice. The next book is called The Obvious Challenge. That's going to come out spring 2026. That's about intentional life design. Same publisher, HarperCollins. And so it just, and then systematically started giving away a lot of the upside of my companies so that I can focus more on this. Hit me over the head for long enough.
Yeah. Is writing, like, I think it's crazy that you've published 12 books, you're writing your 13th.
I mean, yeah, but like, how many of those were good? Call it 6.
Okay. Still.
Call it 6.
writing a book is such a daunting task. Like that's a lot. But you talk about in the obvious choice how you have a system. How much do you write every morning? It's like a certain amount of words.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
I mean, this
2 hours
morning,
a week.
like I was up at 6 this morning. Family usually gets up about 8:30, so I was up at 6, finish about 8, and then I start making breakfast, and then my 2 boys kind of slowly toddle their way out, and I'll usually gently wake up my wife around 8:30. We work well together, her and I, because I'm a morning person, she's a night person.
Mm-hmm.
So the mornings I can kind of handle the load, and then at night, really past like 3 p.m., I'm pretty much useless. So she does the night times, and then but this is like, I think this is an important conversation to have, because if you think about what, I mean, dating apps as an example, like how do most people meet girls these days? They go on dating apps, which is fine. There are some things that they make easier. For example, everybody who's on there knows that everybody else is interested in finding something. So immediately that initial awkwardness, do they have a boyfriend? Do they not? Or look, it opens up a much more honest conversation, right? There's the same intent,
Right.
which allows you to just be like, yo, I wish you the best. That was super cool meeting you, but like, I don't think this is going to work, but I wish you the best, versus that awkward. So that's cool. But the problem comes down into search. And this is a deeper conversation that I'd love to have, if you will engage me with it. When it comes to dating apps, you put in who you are, you put in what you're looking for, which is always going to be people similar to who you are in your interests, in the patterns of your day. But actually, the best relationships can be best defined by people who are complementary to one another. They're the yin to the yang. There is similarity in values, but actually they're opposite in a lot of ways. And so my wife, Allison, is a night person. I'm a morning person. On a dating app, she probably would have included hobbies that happen past 10 p.m., as if that's a time that people experience vertically. It's not for me.
Right.
And so we probably would have never met. The very thing that makes our household management work so well probably would have stopped us from finding one another if
That's
we tried to
fascinating.
find one another electronically.
Yeah. I'd never thought about that before, but that's so interesting. And we wonder why so many relationships are so short term nowadays and stuff doesn't seem to last. I think that complementary qualities in a relationship are so important. My best friend, I've been friends with him since I was 4 years old. And I mean, we're very similar people if you look at us like on the outside. And my guess is that you and your wife are very similar if you look at like your values and things like that, right?
100%.
But when it comes to habits, and there is that different, there's that complementary part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. That's how I think a lot of good relationships, whether they're romantic or friendships, work, but a lot of common media pushes us to really hyper focus on the similarities.
And you got to think all of this. I mean, we're basically a society run by search, right? You think about, I mean, you're not at the point now where you're buying a house, but another example is buying a house, buying a property. And there's actually really interesting data that backs this up, that houses just outside of search bubbles are priced much lower than houses on the other side of the block that just happen to be in the neighborhood. You know, so if you're searching for a house, you're going to search for a house with like 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, or what about a house with 3.5 bedrooms? Or what about a house that, you know, if there's a school district that's in vogue, for example, people are going to search for that district on the app. What about a house that is 1 block on the other side of the road? And what about if you don't care about the school district because your kids are grown up, but you're not going to have kids? There are lots of ways, if you understand how these things work actually, where you can almost assume or assess how the search works and then find like advantages outside of that. There's a lot of like really interesting false economies that you can take advantage of. It's really fun.
That's interesting. But you have to dig in. You have to know what to look for and understand that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what's missing. That's one of the biggest. I think it was a Charlie Munger thing. Like every business author ever, I'm going to quote Charlie Munger. What he always says is invert, always invert. Like you don't look at what's there, you look at what's missing. And I talk about this with outlier stories and obvious choice, where it's like, well, yeah, even if somebody makes the dumbest decision ever, and it only works 5% of the time, like, yeah, they have a 95% chance of failure, but they also have a 5% chance of success. And so what happens next time when that same person makes a dumb decision? It's not going to work for them, but you don't see that because you've moved on to the next outlier.
Right.
And you're comparing yourself to them. Well, it works the same way when you're making big decisions in life, like you're looking for a house. What do other people care about that they value that you don't? Maybe you love the fact that you want to live next to a pub because you want to reach over your fence and get a pint. And so other people would not, that house will be discounted, whereas that bug for others is a feature for you. Again,
Right.
Other people care about school districts or whatever, walkability. Maybe you don't. So then you actually look for places that don't have that. You search based off of what other people don't want in order to find advantages. And then there's just a huge drop off from best to second best. There always is. Like you can live, where'd you say you live? Philadelphia?
My family's from Philly. I live in New Hampshire.
Okay, so New Hampshire, from what I'm told, is beautiful. I've never visited. But
It
I'm
sure
sure that
is.
there are really, really fancy neighborhoods that are super in vogue, that are on lakes and whatever. You should probably look for a house in the second best lakeside village in New Hampshire. Because it's going to be just as good and way cheaper than the best lakeside village.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, people look for the best, but
There's a
I mean,
huge
it's a
drop-off.
lot cheap. Right. I mean, I'm looking into going to college right now, and there's the same thing with the best and the second best. That same principle
Interesting.
applies to university.
Where are you looking at going?
So for my entire childhood, I had the goal of Stanford, and then I applied there early, and I got rejected, like 98%, 97% of people.
Sure.
And so now now I'm looking at like UC Berkeley or Northeastern, but those schools are like right below that top Ivy League and plus Stanford tier list. And yeah, it's interesting to see that like you're still getting basically the same quality of education, but that best has all of this like allure and this reputation.
There is something about those titles. I mean, why did I sign a book deal with HarperCollins for my first traditionally published book? I mean, I've self-published. I've sold a few 100,000 self-published books. Why did I go with HarperCollins? My first there's something about those titles still where nobody's ever going to ask you what grades you got. Nobody's going to ever ask you what ranking you got in your class. But if you're able to say that you have a degree from Stanford, it shouldn't mean anything different. But it might for some things, probably less and less. To be honest, what you're doing right now with this podcast is more valuable than any degree you could ever have in terms of opportunities that it's going to open up for you. And so I would say that any of those considerations are secondary. How many of your buddies have podcasts where they're reaching out to people that they want to get to know and having one-on-one conversations with them? Do you have any?
Nope.
So, I mean, how many of your buddies got into Stanford? Probably one or two.
None of them, but yeah.
Well, screw them.
Yeah, exactly. Something you talked about earlier that I thought was super interesting, and you brought it up so much in your book, was trust. One of my favorite quotes, I wrote it down. You said, trust through community, specificity, and familiarity drive more sales, easier sales, and more profitable sales than any piece of content, script, or advertisement on their own. And like, even taking that away from sales even, and just in general in life, I trust as a human connection, trust is something that is going out the window. I mean, you look at Instagram, and I don't know, it's just this dehumanization. It's inhuman. I think your book was so refreshing because of these obvious things it made me think about. Like, of course, talking to someone and building and becoming famous to the family is more effective than posting content and just like throwing shit against the wall and hoping it sticks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was fascinating to me.
So this leads into a fun conversation about information that's easy to sell versus information that's really important. And there's lots of aspects of it. One of them is just simply what's easier to package up and communicate, especially communicate in a modern day where you've got to snip off all of the nuance at the beginning and the end and communicate this thing over the course of a matter of seconds. You can't talk about psychological transactions the same way. It's very easy to tell you very quickly and make you feel like you're doing something by telling you how to A/B test a thumbnail or write a better hook or create a better offer. Whereas all of those things are secondary to, my buddy told me you were the shit. None of that other stuff matters. Right? You think about what you consume. Think about what you buy. Think deeply about it for a second. How much of that is because some algorithm fed you it through pure discovery? It was through some sort of trusted recommendation. Look around you at everything you own. Either it was just convenient, like this gum just happened to be the gum in the store, fine. But just about everything else is because somebody that I already trust told me to go check it out. Like, I'm basically never going to read a book and buy a book if it doesn't get recommended to me, especially a new book that comes out, especially a business book, because so many business books that come out these days are just not that thoughtful. They're playing the game of trying to be a New York Times influencer so that they can increase their speaking fees. They're not trying to write a book because they feel like they have like real wisdom to pass along. And so I need like 20 people that I trust to tell me that this thing is really good before I check it out. I think about the information that you consume, the video that you check out. It's because your buddy told you it was good.
Right.
That's just how we find things. As a producer of this kind of stuff, yeah, you're right, the world's gone mad. But when they zig, you zag. If everybody's going in one direction, you don't go in that direction. I promise you that there will be people who are better looking than you, more eloquent, have more money to spend, and are better connected than you are. You could try to play that game. Some will win, but it's a very difficult game. So when they zig, you zag. But I'll tell you, Jack, and I knew this was going to be the case, right? The uptake on this book has been slow. Out of the gates, it sold well because a lot of people trusted me from other books and work that I've done. But out of the gates, now the uptake has been slow, and I hope that it will get passed on and live on its own merits. I'm going to do everything that I can for that. But I know why. Because it's a book that forces you to face a challenging realization, which is that perhaps all of the things that satisfy your ego, that provide you short-term joy, are actually coming at the detriment of your long-term success these days. And you would be surprised at how many people with big, big followings have messaged me privately. They can't ever say this publicly because their entire business depends on them helping other people build big followings, because what they realize the hard way is that really one of the only things you can sell if you've built a big following is how to tell other people to build big followings. But they message me privately and they're just like, God, I'm glad somebody said this. I spent years building that account. One guy literally has 500,000 followers. He's like, I couldn't even sell 25 t-shirts off of TikTok. And so I look at this stuff and I'm like, it's going to take some time. It's kind of like abs. You got to get it to realize that it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing anybody I know that started a business has done is freaking create an Instagram account. They create an Instagram account and post something, right?
Yeah,
and
feels like progress.
Right, but it's not. So if what we're being told is the first thing you should do isn't the right thing, then what should like new business owners be focusing on if it's not social media?
Yeah. So Google has this innovations lab called X. And they invest a few $1 billion into it. And X is Google's innovation lab that's designed to test and develop what they call moonshot bets. Basically, innovations that are not just a little bit better, that are a minimum 10 times improvements on whatever else is out there. And they do look up what they're working, like ridiculous stuff that they're working on. And they know that a lot of them are crazy ideas, and that's kind of the point. And the guy who heads it up, his name is Astro Teller. His nickname is, of course, Astro, right? The guy who heads it up, his name is Astro Teller. And one of the things that he insists is that every project brief that anybody comes to him with includes the words monkey first. And the story behind that is this. I changed it a little bit for the book because his example wasn't funny enough for me. But his story is, imagine you're trying to get a monkey to recite Shakespeare on a pedestal. You have two jobs, right? Job number one is, can you get the monkey to recite Shakespeare? Job number two is to build the pedestal. Now, what Astro Teller says is, what most people do is they go ahead and they start building the pedestal because it feels like work, it feels like progress. But the pedestal doesn't matter if you can't get the monkey to recite Shakespeare. So actually what you have to do is you have to first test the assumption of whether you can get a monkey to recite Shakespeare. Only then do you start building the pedestal. So in Choice, I talk about monkey tasks and pedestal tasks, right? What are all the pedestal tasks in business? Creating an Instagram account. Debating over the best camera to buy. Getting a trademark, incorporating a company. The best software to use, right? Those are all pedestal tasks. They might be difficult. They might be expensive, but you can do them. Like, that those are figure-outable problems. What's the monkey task? Does anybody want your shit? That's it. Do you have something that people want to go out of their way to buy? Because if you don't, no amount of content is going to make a difference. No production quality is going to make a difference. So what do? You come up with a basic, vague idea. You establish who will benefit from that idea. Everybody already has a list. You already have contacts, friends of friends, right? And then you do what's called permission marketing. All of this is offline. All of this is behind the scenes. But you call them up, you email them. These are friends of friends. These are maybe family friends, whatever. Let's say you want to sell digital marketing services to real estate agents. Okay. You come up with some sort of a hook. You don't really know, but you could probably get on the phone with 10 people who work tangentially in the real estate industry. And if you can't, you probably shouldn't be selling to them. Maybe just because it's an attractive market, you don't have any connections and there's an easier route, and maybe you expand to that afterwards. But if you can make a list of 10 people that are friends of friends that work in real estate or whatever, it doesn't have to be agents, anybody. You message them and you say, hey, what's up? I'm Jack. My mom so-and-so gave me your number. My friend so-and-so gave me your number. Hope it's cool that I message. Look, I'm thinking of producing services that are going to help real estate agents, simplify their leads. I don't quite know what it's going to become yet. I have some ideas, but I'm young, I'm hungry, and I'd love to get max 10 minutes of your time on your schedule to just learn more about you, so that I can try to put something together. Could you make time for me? Not everybody will say yes, but most will. Because if you ask somebody for advice, they'll go out of the way to help you. If you ask them for money or business, you'll get ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're on the call with them, right? And you're asking about them, specific to their frustrations. How can you speak their language? What words do they use? And then at the end of it, you say, hey, Brian, man, I can't, this was so helpful, especially when you're taking notes while they're talking, right? Especially when you said X and Y. Can't tell you how much this means to me that you took the time. Look, I'm going to take this, and I'm chatting with a few others as well. I'd love to come back and get your opinion on what I've put together in, 2 weeks' time. If you're down to it, of course, I know I've already taken some time, but can we get something on the schedule just to chat about it? Yes, most people will say yes. And then in those 2 weeks, you're basically talking to them about services that you know that they need because they told you exactly what they needed and why they needed it. Well, that's how you start, right? Because you've already now spoken to this person one-on-one for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's how you start. And if you can't get anybody to get on the phone with you or say yes based off of that, you can't get your monkey to recite Shakespeare.
Don't build the pedestal.
No Instagram account with a hook and an offer is going to make a lick of difference at that point. Don't build your pedestals.
That's so powerful. Yeah. And the fact that you get their advice so you can build a product that they would actually genuinely want, and then you go back asking for advice, and you're selling to them without framing it as asking for their advice. Yeah. I found that part of the book really interesting.
And they're going to be in your corner because they're going to have some ownership over the process.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be cool for them. And I made this mistake a bit actually with choice with this book is I did not include others in the process of creating the book as much as I should. I quoted a lot of people and I told a lot of people stories, but I didn't actually get on the phone with them. Mm-hmm. I knew their stories. And then what I did is I basically fact-checked it with them afterwards. The few people who I actually called and was like, hey, I remember, when we hung out 2 years ago, you told me about this thing. Look, I'm working on a book for HarperCollins. Can I just talk to you about it for a minute? Even if it came out with the same content when the book came out, that person now, Shane Snow is a good example of that. Shane is brilliant. He was the one that the Sesame Street razor heuristic, that kind of came from conversations with him. And, I knew some of that stuff. I knew that I wanted to include some of that stuff. Shane is brilliant. I liked his books. I've spent a lot of time with him. But I actually got on the phone with him and did that work. And sent him the section afterwards. Shane's got a big audience. Shane's got a good following, right? And he then was like one of the first people to promote the book because he felt some ownership over it. He was involved in the making of the thing. That's the hack.
Right.
That's the hack.
You try to include people in it and they'll help out.
Yeah.
I think about, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And he gave the example of when, I'm trying to remember the exact, everyone involved, but Carnegie, Mr. Steele guy, I'm forgetting his first, what was his first name? Richest man.
Andrew Carnegie.
Thank you. Andrew Carnegie, named the fact. Right, yeah. He named a factory after someone that didn't want to buy from him. And then that guy, of course, bought for him.
How do you not buy from somebody at that point? Yeah.
And so, you give someone some sense of purpose, and of course, they're going to want to return the favor and reciprocate it a little bit. Yeah.
We're so insular in our work these days. We're all on our own little islands. You know what the single best thing that I ever did in my career was? I'll tell you. It's this little thing behind the scenes, right? Everything's under the ice, under the water. You know, the majority of the iceberg is under the water type thing. So I self-published my first book in 2011, Ignite the Fire, and the book did okay, right? And I was building up an audience and whatever. And then in 2013, I went and I did a revised and updated version of that book. And I fixed some little logical fallacies and whatever. But the biggest change that I made in that book was I went through the entire thing and I said, what point am I making here? And then I went and found somebody else who works in my industry that has already made that point somewhere else on their own platform. And I quoted them instead of making my own point.
Mm.
I mean, there's always going to be somebody else who's saying what you're already saying, right? And so what I did is I went back and I re-edited that book, and I edited in 90 other people's names.
Wow.
Into the book. And then when I went to release the updated version, some of these people I didn't know. But I was able to reach out to them and I was able to say, hey, so-and-so personal trainer, I loved your work on queuing, on how to queue clients, external versus internal queues. I actually included and quoted your work in this book that's coming out. I'd love to send you a copy. Would you accept it? Every single person, of course, said yes. And when I sent them the copy, I pre-highlighted their section from the book, and I put a sticky note in that page where they appear. And I wrote their name on the top of the sticky note and an arrow pointed down. And I said, look, Jack, it's you. And there's an arrow pointing down. If you were to ask me the single thing that I did that I think has the largest impact on my career based on the filter of what helped me almost break through that invisible barrier of everybody who's trying to get attention, at the same time, we're all kind of coming up against the ceiling. What's the single thing I did that I think probably allowed me in my industry to get past that mark? That would have been it.
That's super smart. I love that. And I've been trying to, since reading your book, I've been trying to implement this, different strategies similar into my podcast. So,
give me an example. I'd love to hear it.
Yes. So last week I had a reel. I collaborated with someone. I got 12,000 views, which cool. was my most yet. And I was like, oh, that's gonna be so good for the podcast. I was out of town. I was at a climbing competition, so I didn't check my downloads or anything. I come back.
What do you mean it's going to be so good for the podcast? Like it's going to drive so many people to the podcast?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I assumed.
That doesn't happen.
And that doesn't happen at all. I looked at my full episode on YouTube. I had 23 views and I had 16 downloads. I'm like, wow, okay. So let's rethink some stuff. So my new idea, and I've tried it out already, and I haven't really seen that many results, but it's to DM people that liked that reel, right? And say, hey, I saw you liked my reel with David Lorimer. What did you like about it? Have you checked out the full episode yet? Could you give me some advice on what I can do to make it better?
That's cool.
And hopefully that'll engage people, because every podcast episode I've ever loved, I've sent to my mom or my friend and someone that could and it shared it that way because it connected with me.
First of all, amazing. Two things come to mind. One is, yes, you realized the truth. I've spoken to a lot of really, really high-end podcast marketing companies, and all independently said the same thing, which is that cutting up your podcast into shorts and reels on any platform doesn't have any effect on growing your podcast. Almost none. What it does is it provides you content for that platform, but people are generally platform specific. And so somebody who enjoys content on YouTube is not going to go anywhere other than YouTube. Somebody who enjoys it on Instagram is generally not going to see something on Instagram and go somewhere else. And so the way to grow podcasts is to collaborate with other podcasters, to guest host, to buy ad spots on other podcasts, that type of thing. But podcasts are also almost impossibly difficult to grow. And growth hack They can be done, but it's just very difficult. But the real part of that I really, really love is you did the unscalable stuff. That's hard. And what you're doing, there's an article actually that I'm going to write probably next week, and I might use you as an example actually, because I think that's wonderful. Because that is a beautiful example of doing the stuff behind the scenes that nobody is ever going to see, that is going to become a very important and valuable part of your story. That so few people will be willing to do, that even if you talk about it, it's going to fall on deaf ears. When I decided that I wanted to take social media seriously a couple years ago, and I go in and out of that, but when I decided I wanted to take it seriously, I was like, I'm going to build up my Instagram. And I had basically a dead Instagram account. I had like 10,000 followers. It was a dead Instagram account, like no engagement, no nothing. I never posted on it. I did a few things, but one of them that I still do to this day is you can search when people share your post. And you can do, I think it's like view post shares or whatever, view reel shares. It's like the 3 dots in the top right. And I'll go in there still to this day, and I'll find people, and you see all the current reshares to your stories of your posts of your material. I'll go in there and I'll find people not following me that have reshared my material, and I'll send them a message. And I'll do, you can't really do more than like 20 or 30 a day, or else Instagram starts to block you. But I'll send them a message, and I'll be like, Jack, man, yo, thanks so much for sharing this. Also, I'm curious. It looks like you aren't following my page yet. How did you find this post? And then we're engaged in a conversation. I'll invite them to chat anytime, and then I'll say, oh, by the way, of course, look, if you want to follow along, I'd love to have you. Every single day, right? Nobody sees it. Nobody sees it. But this person, if you think about one of the core concepts in the book, which is that people who buy lots, people who don't. People who share lots. People who don't share. And so it behooves you then to go out of your way to find people already sharing your material, even if they're not following you, because they are the type of person who shares that type of material. They're not just going to do it once. What you're doing is you're reverse engineering an engaged page with an audience that you've self-selected over time to be the type of people who are taking actions that benefit for you. That's what you're doing. It's brilliant.
That's so good. I love. Yeah, and it's providing that personal anecdote to something that's become so unpersonal. It's something that's so, like, normally we're alienated from people on social media, but you're actually making a connection. These people have a reason to want to buy into what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's wild. It's wild how many people I'll send a message to just saying, like, thank you. If they, for example, if somebody posts a picture and tags me of one of my books or something like that, and I don't know who they are, I'll, even if they're following me, right, I'll message them and I'll just say, like, thanks so much. Hey, also, like, I'm curious, where'd you hear about this book? And especially my books for personal trainers, because my books have been around for a long time, and especially Ignite the Fire has kind of become like the go-to guide for people starting a training career, there's a lot of gym owners that will buy the book for every new staff that works for him or her, or they. And what very often it'll be like, oh, so-and-so, more senior trainer than me, or friend in the industry, or gym owner bought me a copy or lent me a copy of theirs. And I'll be like, oh, what's their IG? Inevitably, this person is not following me. I've never heard from them before in my life, right? But they're passing along my book in real time. I'll send them a message to say thank you. Hey, what's going on, Steve? Yo, Maggie just posted a picture of my book, said that you should pass along. Dude, I'm so grateful, man. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. Yeah, dude, man. Look, I came across your book like when I started training 8 years ago, passing it along to everybody. So cool of you to reach out. I'll send them a quick video. There's so much of this behind the scenes that you don't see, and it's so much more important than what you do see
Right.
that's going on in front of your face. Can't measure it, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
is this guy Steve going to now recommend my book to more people over a longer time horizon because I reached out to him and said thank you? I mean, first of all, it just feels good. Like, writing books, you're in a black box, man. I mean, of the thousands and thousands of copies that Obvious Choice sold at launch, how many of those people have I heard from? Not many. Some. Not many.
well, I bet it's just really fulfilling for you to have that, like, even though it is helping you in a lot of ways, it's also just helping fulfill you and having that connection with people that have benefited from your stuff. Like, that's something that I can imagine just feels great.
100%. I mean, why else do we do it? Like, at a certain point in time, and I think you'll get to this point pretty early on in your career, money ceases to be a real motivator or consideration. Not for everybody, right? Some people are continually motivated by money, and no matter how much they have. But for most, at a certain point in time, past a level, money, So why do we do what we do? I think it's for two reasons. One is the pursuit of greatness, really. The pursuit of greatness. And not the pursuit of greatness because you want to be great or you want the ego hit or you want to be, get the rewards or the prestige of somebody else saying that you're great. You want to make the Hall of Fame, whatever that is, metaphorically for whatever you're doing. It's the pursuit of greatness because of what you become as a result of pursuing greatness. And then the other is, just connecting with people on something that you're deeply passionate about. I mean, how cool is that? Being able to share those little moments like we did before this podcast about baseball and about your shitty Philadelphia Phillies, who the Blue Jays beat in the World Series in 1993 when Joe Carter hit a walk-off home run. Yes, I'm still clinging to that. Like, what a cool moment that we had. That made my day. Am I going to remember that a week from now? Probably not. But it made my day today. How wonderful.
Yeah. And that's what really matters, not a number, not the money you buy or the money used to buy things.
Money matters to an extent, right?
Right.
There are levels to wealth. And at a relatively low level, there are very few things that you can't easily afford that measurably improve your quality of life. You can buy the internet and have the world's knowledge at your fingertips. You can get a car that drives the speed limit. You can get heating. You can get a dishwasher. You can get a laundry machine. I mean, you talked about Andrew Carnegie, like penicillin. Like, these things were unheard of in Andrew Carnegie's day. Like the richest man in the world would not even have the audacity to dream of the luxuries that even the lower to middle class takes for granted these days. I think it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, there are a few things, private air travel, let's say, that are still only available to, the really rich. But for the most part, past a certain level of wealth where the stress of being able to pay your bills and overcoming debt kind of become eliminated, it kind of has to be something else. If you're fortunate enough to get to that point, I think it's important to realize that.
Yeah. And you think that's greatness?
I don't know what that is for everybody.
For you, it's greatness.
For me, it is the singular pursuit in the one thing that, for whatever weird, absurd reason, I seem to be naturally both gifted in and energetically aligned with, which is writing more in-depth, longer form type works, right? And so articles, books, not short form stuff for social media. Not that I can't do it, but it doesn't light me up the same way. I can wake up every morning and, get out of my warm bed where I'm lying beside my beautiful wife and drag my ass up and sit in the cold with a hoodie on and struggle through something that I'm working at. And then my wife will ask me how it went, and I'll say terrible. And then I'll be really excited to wake up the next day and do it again. There's nothing else that exists in my life that provides me that same combination, that same exquisite combination of struggle, of frustration, yet exhilaration when I get it, where I have boundless energy, where I can listen and study virtually unlimited amounts of sources and never get bored. I don't think that there's anything else in my life that exists. And so once I figured that out, and it took me a long time to figure that out, but once I figured that out, Jack, it became very obvious that this was my thing. And that I then need to have an obsessive, ambitious, almost unhinged focus on pursuing greatness in that thing, in becoming world-class, the best in the goddamn world at that thing. And whether I get there or not is completely irrelevant, because the pursuit of it makes me a better father, grown-up son, husband, boss, makes me happier every day. I think that's pretty cool.
It sure is. That sounds like where I want to get. I know that's where I want to get in my life, and I think that's where a lot of people strive to get to. That place where they wake up excited to do something that makes them feel good, even if in the moment it doesn't make them feel good. The overarching just task and the pursuit of something, it's purposeful.
Yeah. I think that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
I think that's a great word for it. Purposeful. And a lot of the time it's going to feel difficult, right? And there's inevitably going to be things that you're going to be forced to do because you got to pay your bills and stuff like that. But over time, ideally, those aspects of what you do that pull you away from your thing, you should work to eliminate them as much as possible. What happens, of course, is that humans, nature abhors a vacuum. If there's an empty space, we're going to naturally try to fill it. And so many of us are in what I call never-ending seasons, and as a result, they're never-ending adding. They never actually stop to reassess what they're doing, like spring cleaning, at the end of winter. If you think about how unnatural that is, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, right? Spring, summer, fall would be foraging, would be hunting. The days were generally longer as the sun was out later. The sunrise, the sunset, the days were longer. And then winter came, and so they slept less and they worked hard, right, in the pursuit. And then the winter came and the days got shorter. And, it was obviously difficult, but they spent a lot more time with their families and their communities, and they rested, and they slept a lot more, because when it got dark, you slept. Like, the clock and artificial light are relatively new inventions in human beings' existences. Think about what happened before the light bulb was invented. How many times would you stub your toe? All the freaking time, right? Yeah. Then some dude came along and he was like, yo, I can make fire in a glass tube, but and it'll emit light, but it won't be that hot, but it'll be kind of hot, but not that hot that it would create a fire, and it'll make a light. So you guys want any of this? And you're like, yeah, cool. I don't want to stub my toe anymore. And that changed the world, because that eliminated the seasonality that we were born with. I think it's important to bring back some of that seasonality in what we do, if for no other reason than to force us to stop, to start, to reassess, to reprioritize, to say, I used to be like that, now I'm like this. what changes do I have to make? The Bezos thing, because I'm a business guy and I use a Munger and Bezos quote in every podcast. The Bezos thing, imagine this is day one. The Musk thing, first principles. How many times have you stopped what you're doing and started again, assuming this is day one based off of first principles? Ever? Perhaps it's time to do that.
A little bit of introspection. I think we lack that so much.
A lot of introspection. Yeah, man.
I find it super interesting that you have that seasonal thing where you go every winter with your family to a new country. Thought that was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to leave the country. Like, I'm here in Mexico now. I've done effectively 8 months in Toronto and 4 months abroad every year for the last 13 years. But you don't need to pick up and leave the country to live a more seasonal life. You need to just make sure that you have scheduled in stops and starts. That's it.
That's huge. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's been about an hour, so I think it's a pretty good place to wrap it up. But before we do that, I want you to tell anybody listening where they can find you, what you'd like them to, where they can buy this thing.
Yeah,
I'll
there
leave
you
a
go.
link in my bio as well. But yeah,
Beautiful. Well, the link's going to be in Jack's bio for the book. The book is called The Obvious Choice. Go buy a copy. It's in Kindle, it's in hardcover, it's in audio, whatever format you like. I hope that you absolutely love it. If you want to connect with me on social media, I'm at It's Coach Goodman, basically everywhere.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on today. That was an amazing conversation.
Got it. Thank you, Jack.
You just finished watching or listening to the Grateful Podcast episode with Jonathan Goodman, author of The Obvious Choice and many other books as well. I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed this conversation. I felt like I learned a lot. His perspective is really refreshing compared to everything else you hear out on the internet right now. So I hope you feel the same way. If you do, leave a good review down below. Let me know what you think. Shoot me a message on Instagram and share this with some other people that would enjoy it. Do all of that. Have a great day. Stay grateful. Thanks for watching.